Welcome to Concerning the Spiritual and Art, a podcast exploring spirituality, consciousness, and the creative process. I'm your host, Martin Benson. All right, welcome back to Concerning the Spiritual and Art. Today I have artist, illustrator, designer Liam Warr on the podcast. And our conversation began around sort of his creative origins and growing up in Salisbury, England, near Stonehenge, and sort of how those spaces really opened up his mind and became a place for him to connect with his sort of creative self in an interior way. He talked a little bit about how going to these places really just kind of cleansed him in a lot of ways, almost like places where he went to meditate and find a sense of like balance and groundedness. Having been to those places myself, it's really amazing to think about somebody who grew up just minutes away from these ancient, powerful sites. Then we got into a little bit about his path and through photography and how that sort of evolved into making illustrations and drawings. At one point, he showed us this new drawing process that he's been doing, where he's basically doing breath work through drawing, making these really amazing images through a breathing process that he does, that he explains us to. So that really like caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting to hear or learn anything about that in terms of his work. And it was just another side of the amazing things that he does. So I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. We talk a lot about creative process and sort of hang-ups in the creative process and how to sort of evolve and push through those times when we're not feeling like super creative, or we're not feeling like our outputs aren't where we want them to be. He has a lot of great insight and wisdom to share around this. And I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. Here you go, Liam Warr. All right, Liam Warr, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to connect with you. I've always like really been deeply attracted to the design work that you're doing, that I've seen through Instagram, and just feeling such like an incredible resonance with the power of the imagery that you play with. Of course, I'm like a lover of symmetry. You play with a lot of symmetry and geometries in your work. And so I'm really excited today to spend some time connecting with you, learning about you and your creative process. And I remember we had a quick phone call a few months ago just to kind of check in and talk about the podcast. And you mentioned that you grew up in Salisbury, England, near Stonehenge, and how that kind of was really inspirational for you growing up near not only Stonehenge, but a lot of those ancient sacred sites. And I've always been so fascinated by ancient history, especially like lost ancient history that we feel like we don't really fully get, or understand completely. But I've been to Stonehenge before and in that area, and I can't help but express like how powerful it was for me, just the resonance there and just the feeling I got. So I couldn't imagine growing up in a landscape like that or near that. So I was curious if we can maybe start the conversation sort of about that, like your experience growing up in a place so iconic and powerful as where you were raised.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, for me, I felt very lucky to be someone who was in that area, as, it attracts people from all around the world for its history and, the energy, as you say, that it creates and has there. And I think, maybe I haven't spent enough time there myself, but I do feel that going to these sorts of places, you do get a connection to, the earth and elements there, and this sense of history and what brought people there maybe originally. And it's nice to kind of go to those places and just relax, open your mind, and kind of let your consciousness take a bit of control, and use that as a way to maybe just cleanse your brain, relax, reset yourself, recenter yourself, and then put that back into artwork. I think that is a good thing about living in the area I grew up in, being so peaceful and remote and relaxing.
Yeah.
It definitely was a way for me to, if I'm too clouded in my head, I can go to these places, just relax with my thoughts, meditate, whatever it may be, and then come back into my own space and put that into an artistic way.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing like how these kinds of places, not only do they have like there, because it's mysterious, right? Like
Hmm.
there could like you like briefly mentioned like how these places might have been identified by these ancient cultures as having some sort of special alignment or resonance or connection.
Hmm.
So you can feel that there, but then on top of it, it's like all the ideas and projections of like humanity, like putting in this feeling of this space there also coats your experience as well. And regardless, it's still a powerful thing to tap into, talking about how it kind of like are places where you can go kind of cleanse, kind of
Hmm.
purify your mind and your body a little bit. So that you can become more creative. Like, when did you start like really consciously identifying as an artist or creative? Like, were you really young?
I
Like,
think I was very young. Like, I
mhm.
mean, ever since I could hold a pencil, my mom and my dad were buying me artistic tools, paint, pencils, pastels, whatever. And
Yeah.
I used to love catching bugs in my garden and putting them in jars and trying to draw them.
Oh, cool.
And that was kind of the thing I used to do, or draw flowers in my garden, things like that. Very, impressionist stuff, trying to copy what I could see.
Hmm.
Um, and then that just continued with me my whole life. I always wanted to do art, always wanted to make art. Um, and it just, as I got older, I got into more artistic ventures and found my way into photography after that, and
Yeah.
thought that was it for the rest of my life. I'd be taking pictures forever, and managed to come back to making artwork, which is just kind of one big circle that I found over
That's
the
really
years.
interesting. What kind of photography did you used to do? Like, what were some of the subjects you used to explore?
Um, I used to love doing portraits or city street photography.
Hmm.
And then I did a lot of landscapes. So I would go get up really early in the morning, go to the beach, set my camera up on the waves, and just kind of do really long exposures that are like 1 to 2 hours long.
Wow.
And they would just be these big blank images, but you would have all this color and motion in the waves. And it just, yeah, I used to do a lot of that. And then, yeah, landscapes in general, just because of where I lived.
Yeah.
And then I would do a lot of experimenting with film. I used to have a huge film camera collection, and I would do all kinds of double negatives, all kinds of different exposures, and trying out slide film and 6x9, and just going wild with
Cool.
it.
Oh man, I
Yeah.
love that stuff. I did a lot of photography too. That really was a big thing that kind of got me into like, I guess, identifying as an artist. Like, I'd always drawn my whole life and been into making art. It was definitely a big part of my life, but photography was like such an interesting experience for me, especially
Hmm.
when I got into analog photography, shooting with film, black and white. And there's something really magical about those experiences, shooting with
Yeah.
the analog equipment. I'm curious, like, do you still do any photography, or do you feel like your photography, like from the past, has any influence on sort of like how your aesthetic has evolved as a designer, as a illustrator, an artist?
I think it definitely still there. I don't really take pictures so much anymore.
Hmm.
Occasionally I do, when I really, really want to, or it's just something I need to take a picture of. But I definitely take that focus of angles and depth, and I use that to see into my artwork, or see things around me that I want to take that tiny little aspect that I can see and put that into a bigger picture, basically.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. When I see some of your designs, you have certain vanishing lines, like the way perspective sometimes plays in some
Mm-hmm.
of those and some of those designs as well. Do you still have a lot of your analog equipment, like all the old
I
cameras?
do have the ones
Good.
that I'm quite partial to. I've kept because I just can't
Yeah.
let them go. Some of
Yeah.
them, like I have an old West German camera that you just that piece of history I just want to keep more
Yes,
than anything.
definitely.
Old Russian cameras I love.
It's amazing. Like I have a pretty, I'm looking at my little collection up there on my little bookshelf. I have a little collection of some, I mean, I wish I have mostly 35 millimeters.
Hmm.
I have like some of those toy cameras, those Holgas and
Yeah,
whatnot.
I have a few of those still
Those
too.
are fun too to play with like 120 film. And
Hmm.
then I never really got one of my own, but like playing with like twin lens cameras
Yes.
and stuff like that, or the 4x5s. Like, It's amazing. And it's kind of coming back. People are definitely getting into it more. I think there's something about that tactility and that process that's really attractive
Hmm.
for people as well. But photography, I think, is also an interesting way to like center yourself in a space and be observant, of a particular place and time. But for me, the paradox of photography is like, although I'm being super observant when I'm shooting of like light and form and perspective and all that, I also found myself at some point feeling like I'm in some ways removed from the moment in some ways as well, because I'm so conscious of like getting my settings right that I'm not fully present. So I found myself
Hmm.
becoming a disenfranchised with it because I felt like I just wanted to like experience something without having to capture it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, I have had that experience a lot, especially with important events that I've been to with family and friends and taken my camera. I've been too caught up in getting those shots that I forgot to be there in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think film definitely brings some of that back because
100%. Yeah.
you don't know what you're going to see until you develop it. So you
Mm-hmm.
do focus more on those perfect moments.
Yes.
But then in the same way, film, the dark room for me, it was just a magical place. It's like being
So much.
in your studio, once you have your setup and your music and you relax, and it's just like you're in another world, in another place. It's a great
Yeah.
experience that you don't get when you just sit at a computer clicking, sliders all day.
Yeah. No, I mean, you can create like a ritual and like kind of a container for like a powerful experience around the digital technology, but I think you just have to be really intentional about
Mm-hmm.
it. You know what I mean? Because it's so ubiquitous in our environment. Another thing that kind of like pulled me away from doing, I still do photography. I still love taking pictures. I love looking at great photography. I have some friends who are really amazing photographers, and I'm just always in awe of like what they do. But sometimes, like to your point about like being at these events and stuff, like just wanting to be like present in them,
Mm-hmm.
like you see around, like everybody is always pulling their phone out like for everything, like concerts. Like whenever we go to concerts, like I see so many people just like experiencing the concert through the filter of their phone
Yeah.
screen. And it's like it's cool in some sense because you get a lot of documentation of these great moments and live music. But I'm also like, man, I just feel like we're missing the point of what's going on, this
Yeah.
real connection with the moment.
I
Yeah.
agree, definitely.
Yeah. Do you so for you, like going from analog and being really like connected with that and then slowly transitioning to working on the computer and doing illustration, like how do you create like an environment for you to really get in sort of the creative zone with the digital technology that you're now implementing a lot?
A lot of it I find starts in the real world, like
Hmm.
me finding something in the real world that I am inspired by. It can literally be a crack on the ground in the pavement. Like
Hmm.
I just will see it and I'll say, oh, that's it. That's the thing I'm looking for. And then
Wow.
I'll pull out my notebook and just scribble down what I think it wants to look like. And then I'll transfer that to a digital, realm. Um,
So you are using sort of like your photographic eye in a way, but
yeah,
not capturing the moment, just kind of noting it and then recalling it. Cool. I love
hmm.
that.
Sometimes if
Awesome.
I don't have my notebook, I'll just take a picture on my phone and
Yep.
save it into a folder and do the same kind of process.
Hmm.
But yeah, a lot of the time, digitally, I have started from a real point that I've seen something. Um, Sometimes I will just go straight in digitally and just go, today I just want to play around with some shapes or
Yeah.
some lines, or I have this idea that I think might work straight away from the digital world.
Yeah.
Um, but it can, sometimes I can be 5 minutes before I'm going to bed. I get this idea. Other times I'm putting myself in a space and I'm setting myself up for it, and then
Hmm.
it slowly comes to me.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I don't. I find sometimes I'm just completely random with the way my art comes out.
Yeah. There's different sort of like ways that those sort of streams flow into you. And you
Mhm.
don't like try to like channel it one direction, but you're just open to the
No,
inspiration that comes.
yeah, I can, you know, put my mind to it and create something, and it does often happen that way. But I just sometimes like just going with the flow and seeing how it goes. And
Yeah.
even if I don't like it, I'll still try and finish it, or just change my idea up. That's the great thing about working digitally is you can just start again, and you don't have
Yep.
to feel like you've wasted anything.
Yeah. You can kind of play around with those forms. Are you using Illustrator, like Adobe Illustrator, or
Primarily,
primarily?
yeah,
Any other programs that you like to use? I know there's a lot
um,
more coming out these days with like the iPads and like digital painting.
yeah.
Pretty
So I
cool.
use like for the shapes and tones and the general starting points of my artwork, I use Illustrator, and then I'll move on to apps on my phone that are
Mm,
for coloring and kind of those almost 3D styles that I will put on my
cool.
artwork.
Yeah.
A lot of those I use. There's a great app called Mirror Lab, which is all about refracting and kaleidoscopes and taking the image, and you can change it on all these different trippy ways.
Cool.
I use that, and then they have 4 or 5 other different apps that do coloring, glitching, distortion in various ways.
Amazing.
And I've ever since I found those, I've been in love with those apps because I can just create a whole bunch of images on Illustrator, load them up on my phone, and just play with them
Play.
on the bus, play with
Yeah.
them, when I'm waking up, whatever I want to do, and then I can just switch them back to Illustrator, tweak them more, and it just kind of goes back and forth, back and forth.
Are they vector files on your phone too? Like, are they translated
No,
back through?
I have
Yeah.
they have to be flattened into a PNG
Yeah.
or JPEG or something.
Got it. Got it. But then you can probably translate them back to like higher
Yeah,
resolution,
yeah,
when you need
yeah.
to and stuff.
And if you want to make it transparent background, it will keep the transparentness for some of
Cool.
the.
It's amazing the technology, like all these tools. Cause like, for me, like I definitely use Illustrator and Photoshop for certain things. Sometimes even with my painting process, like I have an idea or a certain color I just can't figure out, can't
Mhm.
really quite get that composition we want. I'll just throw some things together real quick and just try it.
Yeah.
It's an amazing tool. I think that people get really attached to some sort of pristine idea of what art making should be or could be. But
Hmm.
really, it's like all these things are at our disposal, and it's about the user and how they interface with these tools to create images that matter the most. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily about, being obsessed with one medium over another.
No,
You
and I
see
don't
that
think it,
sometimes.
and I don't think it has to be. Obviously everybody uses Adobe and it's an industry standard, but it doesn't have to be like however you make your artwork is however you choose to do it.
Yep.
It's whether you use a free software or what. It's just if you can create it, that's good for you.
Exactly. I mean, that's the most beautiful thing is just being able to spend time engaging in the creative process and using your mind and your talent and your skill and in that moment to manifest something that didn't exist before. Like that is a
Hmm.
powerful tool of the human consciousness, the creative principles that we can employ in our lives. And anyone who is going to engage in that kind of experience, it's a beautiful thing. And I feel like there should never be a sense of negation of one over another. It's really about embracing creativity as the most important, I think, most fundamental thing that makes human beings what they are in
Yeah.
some sense.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's everything else, like you could say you can find in the natural world, the animal kingdom for sure. And you see creativity in the animal kingdom, no doubt. But the way that we consciously create for creative sake as well, like art for art's sake kind of
Hmm.
idea, right? Like where it's not just having a utilitarian or practical purpose, but it's for like the magic of the act of creation itself. That to me is something like very special, like a special signature of the human species that I want to see become more and more embraced by more and more people. Because the one thing I hear from a lot of people when I get into conversations like, oh, you're an artist. Oh, I can never do art. I can never do this. I was never creative. I'm like, and you have to be polite and you don't want to get deep in these conversations with people who probably just don't want to spend time hearing you talk. But
Hmm.
like in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, oh man, if you only knew that you are creative and you do have that potential. It's just to me sometimes it's sad when I see people cut off from that. Do
Yeah.
you do you
I
notice that in your life too?
yeah, I have that experience with that with people I've met in the past, and I've felt the same way as you, and wanted to kind of push them more into saying, you can do it. You can, hey, I make abstract art. A lot of it's just shapes on the page. You know, it's I'm not an amazing impressionist or someone who can take something real and just put it onto paper. I just throw shapes and colors at the page and that's it. You know, call
Yeah.
it a day. And to me, that seems so simple, and to others that seems like impossible. But
Exactly.
they could do that too if they had just more practice and exposure to it.
Exactly, that exposure. I had a conversation with another artist sort of all about this sort of like wounding that happens in the mind of people around notions of creativity for many different reasons based on their upbringing or their experiences. And it's
Mhm.
something that I want to try and dismantle in my life more and more with more people I meet is this the mystique around creativity, and that like it's magical and it's something that all humans can do and have access to. It's just really got to play around and figure out what it is, what medium or material or process really speaks to your skill set or your
Yeah,
interests, you know?
yeah, completely. I completely
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. And so I think about that like as a father too, like with my like I have a young son, and this morning he was like banging around this piano. Like I'm not a very musical person. I
Hmm.
love music. I like to pretend I can sing, like a lot of people, but
Yeah.
like he's just so enamored with banging and making sounds, and I just like want to like I want him to just like embrace that and play and play and play and never have this feeling of like I can do this and I can't do that sort of
Hmm.
thing. I think
Hmm.
these limitations that we put in our mind um, can be so, you know, I don't know. They can be little simple programs that we can just undo with a certain shift in perspective.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think art can sometimes do that. It can kind of shift our perspective a little bit, it can kind of open up those portals in the mind. I look at your work, like a lot of the digital pieces you're doing, and they're so resonant and they're so beautiful, but they're also so like sharp and distinct and penetrating. They also sort of make me feel like sounds, like it's almost like you're visualizing like sonic energy in some way when I look at them. I don't know if that's something intentional for you when you're making, or if music has a big influence on your creative process. But like when I look at them, I can't help but to see music coming from a lot of your work, which is I find to be really beautiful.
I do. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do listen to a lot of music when I create art. Might not always influence the actual specific artwork, like the piece that I might be listening to, but I do feel that kind of motion and that resonance that you're talking about in the art as well.
Yeah. It's from those geometric forms. And sometimes you have a lot of those like repeated sort of oscillating concentric circles or ripples that are coming out that
Hmm.
have this sort of sound like quality. I was actually talking with a musician about cymatics and like the study of sound on matter, and how like there's this incredible relationship between like certain frequencies of sound that will crystallize into certain like symmetrical visual forms. Are you familiar with cymatics? Might be something you
No,
blow your mind. It's
I probably
amazing.
will. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. I'll link something in our video on YouTube, like maybe over
Hmm.
here, to a cymatic video. But like you've seen it before and maybe not even known you've seen it. Like imagine like you could probably do this at your home if you have like a speaker, especially like a subwoofer, and you have like a little tray of water and you put it on top of the
Okay.
subwoofer. You play it and then you play a certain beat and you see these incredible forms show up.
Hmm.
But it gets even more trippy, like what a lot of sort of the experiments you might find online, of where they take these metal plates and they put a speaker underneath the metal plate connected to a tone generator. So
Hmm.
basically just playing very specific tone frequencies, like certain amount of hertz. And they pour any sort of crystalline structure like salt or even sand, anything that's sort of crystalline, because water is crystalline too. That's why you see it in water. And they play certain tones. And what happens is when it hits to certain frequencies, all the sand starts vibrating and moving and moving and moving, and then boom, shoots into a perfect symmetrical form at a
Wow.
certain tone. And then you shift the tone to be a little bit of a higher frequency. There's sort of this intermediary space where the sand's just going chaotically all over the place. And then boom, hits another certain point, a specific frequency. And it's like an even more complex um, mandala sort of shape. And then you go higher
Wow.
frequencies, and the higher the frequency, the more and more complex these images are. And it's like mind blowing. It just shows you this relationship between sound and matter. And that sound is almost like holding form together in some like magical way. But you see these incredible symmetries, like designs that you might find in your own artwork, see play out through sound forms. It's super cool. You can do it at home too, y'all, if you happen to have a tone generator, or you are connected to a science lab, or you're at a high school and there's a science lab, they probably have one. You can play with it, but it's pretty incredible stuff.
Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna have to definitely check that out.
Yeah, it's amazing because it just shows you like this relationship that's there between sound and light and form and matter. And that, but what was interesting is that these certain frequencies, like these certain hertz, I mean, I forget what they are, they tend to just lock everything into a perfect form.
Wow.
And sometimes I look at like this thing happening in my own mind. It's like a metaphor for humanity in some ways. It's like we're shifting vibrational tones, and like in these intermediary states, it looks just like pure chaos. Like it's just pure chaos. There's no form anywhere to be found. But then eventually you hit a certain frequency and boom, a whole new complex structure has been created. And so like I look at like the time we live in right now, it's like almost like we're in between like those perfect tone sets, and we're in this crazy chaos. But I'm praying that eventually that tone will hit and everything will come back into its sense of order.
Yeah, I'd like that too. I like the sound. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, I know, right? But that seems to be how things work. The chaos and order paradigm, this dichotomy between chaos and order is something I think a lot of artists are interested in and play
Hmm.
with. I think artists like you and I, when I look at my own work and look at your work, we're definitely playing with a distinct sense of order. But like the creative process can have a sense of chaos in it until that order comes to be. Would you agree with
Hmm.
that?
Oh, big time. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can just be throwing something at a page until all of a sudden, like you say, the frequencies hit, and then there's an image
Boom.
that forms and the shapes appear, and
Yep.
that's I'm like, okay, now I can see where this is going, and I can expand on that idea.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like seeing the chaos does have play a purpose in some ways, even if it's just to kind of reformulate things in an arrangement so that they can crystallize in a whole new structure that you might
Hmm.
not have imagined was possible before. And I think that's one of the trickiest parts of creative process is being able to be patient with yourself through those times when it just seems like nothing is coming together, nothing
Yeah,
is making sense, but continuing to initiate your creative process will eventually lead you to a place of resonance, a place of where that frequency hits and everything just comes together.
yeah, I agree. I agree
Yeah.
definitely. It's
It,
and sometimes it's just good to be in the mess and just create, even if you don't like it. You just got to
yeah,
get it out. Like sometimes you just got to get rid of that emotion and that energy and make way for new emotions and new thoughts.
for sure.
And you
Yeah,
can't
like
do it until you've had that mess kind of relieve your mind.
exactly. I mean, that's exactly how I look at like a meditation practice is like in a lot of ways, it's like it's becoming still so that all the chaos can settle and kind of filter out. A metaphor that you hear a lot in like meditative lineages is like, especially like in the east, is like you take a jar filled with like water and like dirt in it and you shake it up really a lot, and you look there and the water's super cloudy, but if you just let it sit and be still for a little bit, eventually all of that will go away and it'll be crystal clear again.
Hmm.
And so I look at like the creative process in that way. I look at like a meditative process in that way. It's like sometimes we just have to sit and let the shit run its course,
Yeah,
without trying to change it, without trying to be forceful, without trying to tilt the jar this way and then that way, but just let it freaking be.
yeah,
And by letting it be, it'll take care of itself in some ways. So I always try to remind myself of that when I'm in those like spaces and within my creative process where like nothing seems to be working and I can't figure out what's next or what I'm making. But sometimes I just have
hmm
to sit with it and
yeah.
just.
A lot of the times when I'm in that sort of state of mind, I'll try and maybe switch mediums or,
Mm-hmm.
because I do a lot, obviously, of digital work, but I do a lot of drawing in notebooks and sketchbooks and
Awesome.
printmaking, but a lot of that I just kind of do for myself. I think I don't really do it for sharing it, or no one
Yeah.
really sees
I'd
it. But
love to see it. I'd love to see like
yeah,
the translation of like, the analog process and the digital process. And then,
hmm
I'd be curious. I'm sure probably the aesthetics are similar. Like
some, yeah. Like I
some,
have a few different, I have like a breathing exercise one that I'd like to do, and that kind of it's here. I actually have one right here that I can show you real quick, which is
yeah,
just
let's see it. Let's see it.
so this is a breathing exercise that I like to do.
Oh,
So,
cool.
so I just start with the point, and
Mm-hmm.
then I just make, almost like a ripple or a wave or whatever you'd like to call it. And I just
Yeah.
basically almost like a wood grain,
Yes.
and
Uh-huh.
I just let those lines keep going and going and just focus on my breathing. And just, I'll add these points to kind of give focal points to the page.
Cool.
And I just zone out listening to music, or sometimes just complete silence as well.
Wow. And you're just
And
using the line as a way to sort of also like guide the breath.
yeah, and I just let my hand be as loose as possible and just let it flow around the page, and it's very relaxing for me
Oh,
personally.
yeah. The
And
breath is so magical.
yeah, and a lot of that is just something I've picked up myself. I never really looked into anything specifically to help me with that. I just love wood grain, and it's one of the things I like. Having wood around the house and those textures, and I thought, how could I make this myself? And then it spiraled from this idea, and then now I use it as a practice to kind of, if I'm not enjoying my digital work, I'll just switch to that instead.
I love that, man. I love it. I mean, it's not only that we're going to be really cool drawings, but I just like the idea of using the drawing process as a sort of breath work process. And so you
Mm-hmm.
have like this specific way you want to breathe while the line sort of takes care of itself.
Yeah, and that way you kind of let go of any, if I accidentally breathe too heavy or too sharply, and I make too much of a motion, then that's just how it is, and then that becomes a whole extended part of the shape.
Yeah.
It just you just let whatever happens in those breaths take over the artwork, and it kind of lets you forgive yourself a little bit. I find from mistakes you might make.
Yeah, like letting the mistakes become a part of something more beautiful and bigger.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's
and
so
I
cool.
and that's just a sketchbook, but I have big pieces of paper I've got it on. I went to IKEA not too long ago, and I bought a 30-foot roll of paper that they had there,
Awesome.
and I've been slowly doing those on that as well. And it's like it's going to take me a long time, but my intention was, hey, I could fill this whole thing up with these drawings.
I love it. That's so cool. I think that you definitely need to, when you feel ready and right, like you need to show those. I
Yeah.
think it's so cool to have that side of your practice because the
hmm
digital stuff obviously has incredible power to it and energy. But this is like, can have that as well. So you can kind of like have the best of both and maybe at some point merging those worlds in some way
Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely thought about that for sure.
through
And then,
printmaking and through flatbed scanners and through
hmm
yeah like or like printing out like your digital images and then rendering on top. Like I think that
yeah.
could be really interesting because I know a lot of what you do, you license a lot of your illustrations, people are using them for various means of what they want,
Yeah.
but they also are artworks that existent upon themselves, like just as prints that you could enjoy and look at, which I find to be really beautiful. But that's so cool. I really appreciate you sharing that, Liam. I think that's an
Hey, welcome.
amazing part of your process and something that I kind of want to like, because I do it on my own, like breathing and stuff and my artwork, and like kind of it just happens naturally. But to have like a certain way in which you begin a design and like having this breath work process sort of help create the design is such a beautiful idea,
hmm
because the work that comes out of it is really like grounded in a real healing experience that you're having.
Yeah, it's nice, honestly, because I do find with digital, because you can adjust it so much, people's perfectionism comes out, and then they get, frustrated with the fact that they can change so much that they can't get it right, and it doesn't look right, and they don't think the result that they're doing is what they want.
Yeah.
And like with analog photography, I think drawing and painting in this form that I do just takes some of that away. It means I can
Yeah.
just clear my, you know, negative thoughts out a little bit. And when I come back, I think, oh, actually, this doesn't look so bad. You know, when you
Right.
make something and you take a couple of days away from it, and then you come back and you think, oh, all the things I thought about it were wrong, actually make it look good and stand out, and are the things I enjoy about it.
So funny how that happens, man. Like, because you get so immersed in what you're doing that like
Mm-hmm.
you become blind to it, right?
Oh,
Like
completely.
you become so blind to like what it is you actually made because you've been so deeply into it. So that creating that space away from it, like I have to do that sometimes with work that I'm doing as well. It's like I just feel a little stuck. I'm like, I'm gonna do everything I can not to look at it, not to look at a picture of it that on my phone, not look at it in the studio for like 2 or 3 days and try to like cleanse the palate a little bit. Just
Mm-hmm.
like when you're eating, food, you have so many flavors, you can't taste anything.
Yeah, yeah,
You have to cleanse that out in some sense. That's really, that's very an important part of creative process that artists can really get hung up on is this perfectionism, this sense that like it has to be perfect, perfect, perfect. I see that in myself too, and trying to learn how to let go of that sense of perfection and let the imperfections come through even in subtle ways, because that's where the humanity is in the
yeah.
imperfection in artwork in some sense.
I was watching an interview with Willem Dafoe, the actor, not too long
Mm-hmm.
ago, and he was saying, you know, make a piece of art that sucks, make something that's crap,
Yeah,
do something that you're gonna fail at, because that's how you learn things. That's how you figure out you can't make everything perfect all the time.
exactly.
You know, and when I listen to that, you know, for me, it does help hearing those sorts of things. I think a lot of people can learn from that too.
For sure. Because we're so results oriented in a lot of sense. Just I think it's a symptom of our culture and our time. Results, results, results. But process is really how everything unfolds. I mean, just evolution in itself is a process.
Mm-hmm.
Life is continually, evolving through these processes of chaos and order, life and death,
Yeah,
atrophy and I don't know. I mean, I just think that we embracing those qualities can help us maybe create more space between like our ego, the ones that want to control, and like letting the magic kind of move through us. But we have to be willing to fail, and we have to be willing to try and experiment and do things that we know ultimately won't be seen or shown, or we might not be happy with, because we do learn, especially if we're
yeah.
open in that way.
I mean, I did photography for almost 10 years, and in the in half that amount of time as a graphic designer, illustrator, I've done more successful work than that whole time in photography. And
Yeah.
I loved taking the pictures, but you know, to make a living out of it, to get the jobs I wanted was a lot tougher than the art side. And I just realized, oh well, all those lessons I learned have still helped me, and
Yep.
have still got me to where I am today. But it's okay to think I didn't waste my time doing that.
Yeah.
It's just taking what you have and moving on with those experiences and lessons.
100%. Like everything is building up and teaching you things for these greater and greater missions and purposes and activities that you'll be doing in the future. You're just not aware of it. Like even moving from this kind of job to that kind of job, and like going seemingly meandering in your life. All of a sudden one day you might look back and be like, I picked up this skill and that skill, I met this person, and then this happened. Like everything went in a certain sequence that led me to now doing exactly what I feel like I've been destined to do. But in those
Exactly.
moments, like you forget that, and you get so caught up with wanting to be somewhere that you're not, that you can't embrace that this is going to continue to lead you, especially if you become open to whatever possibilities you might see for yourself, and just letting that come with patience. I think patience is really the key with all that. Would you agree? Like being able
Yeah.
to be patient.
I think so. I think, yeah, like trusting the journey and the process and believing in yourself are important parts to it. But
Yeah,
patience is a big thing, and that is a thing. It takes a long time to learn that for some people,
for
myself
sure.
myself included.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think you can learn a lot from just slowing down, being patient a bit more.
For sure, especially because we want everything to happen immediately, because I can get on Amazon right now and I can order something. It can be here tomorrow. Like everything in my life is programmed to tell me that whatever it is I want can happen right away. But that's not really true, especially in terms of like what it is we want for like the vision of our life. It takes,
Yeah.
it takes time and patience, your artwork, your art process, your practice, like for your art to become like a real vehicle for your life. It's not going to happen in a flip of a switch or overnight. What you have to do is sort of surrender to it. Like I always look at being an artist as a life path. It's a path of life. And regardless of the successes and failures that come, like you commit to it as a path for your life, it will lead you in a way that is going to ultimately help you grow your consciousness to the fullest potential it can be. That has nothing to do with material success or fame or fortune. It has to do with like a sense of real connectedness and well-being within like what it is you've decided to put your energy toward in your life. Because I think that's a fundamental decision we all have, is what it is we want to put our energy into, what it is we want to put our time into. And like we were talking earlier, like how everyone, one of the, I think the gifts of being a human is the creative mind and potential. For us to be able to identify as artists and put our work in every day, sitting at the computer, drawing in the studio, making art, like that to me is such a blessing. Regardless of if that painting ever sells or not, like it's really just what a beautiful way to spend time on a mysteriously chaotic planet that we're on, like to spend time cultivating peace and creativity. That's really special. I feel really grateful every day that I get to spend my time doing that.
Yeah.
I'd imagine you probably feel the same.
Yeah, I do often. Yeah, I feel the same way. Absolutely.
Yeah, but it didn't happen overnight.
No.
Like you had to go through, you had to, try different things. You had to develop different processes, to your point, like
Yeah.
developing skills in ways you didn't even know would apply to what you have to do and what you can do right now.
And even if you have a full-time job and it's just your hobby or part-time or whatever, it's still, you got to still enjoy that. You get time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyone out there listening, if you've been like wanting to dabble in woodworking or welding or graphic design or photography or picking up a paintbrush or sculpting or whatever, like, or playing an instrument, like just do it. Just start and just do it and be patient. And it'll lead you to these kinds of activities that are going to be incredibly wholesome and fulfilling in ways you could never really expect.
Yeah, even if it's just 1 hour a week, it's still
Yeah.
an hour you take it for yourself to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have a certain like process or regiment in terms of your own, like when you go to the studio? Do you like, are you like, I'm in the studio working, whether I'm making something or not, I'm in the studio every day from this time to this time? Or do you kind of float in and out of it? Like, how do you approach sort of staying consistent with your creative process?
I would say it's more, I'll start kind of getting this feeling where I just like need to let it out in some way. And that's when I decide I want to go into an artistic state of mind, like into my own space.
Yeah.
I think, if I had a studio, I probably would delegate more time to it, but I just have my apartment and have an office, which is still great.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time it will be just, I'm almost like on the edge of my seat, get excited, kind of bouncing, ready to make artwork. I just have to go there immediately. And it could be late, it could be early, it could be as soon as I get home from work, it could be whatever it is. If I had, sometimes in the evening I do try and set specific times, but I don't find I tend to stick to them. So I just wait until I have that feeling where I'm just like, I need to let my fingers do something,
Yeah. Those idle hands, they're ready to make. You're ready to engage.
Like I can watch a movie and just have a notebook with me and just doodle on the notebook or on my computer or something. I just kind of fit it in around my life as well.
Yeah.
Where I can, because when I find I don't do it for a week or so, I feel different. I feel like I'm not fully myself.
Oh man, I can relate to that so much. Like when I'm not like when I don't have like a painting or a drawing or a print that I'm making, or I don't have like some ideas I'm working out, like I just don't feel right. Something doesn't feel right. You
Hmm.
know, I always have to like have something that I'm like working on or working toward or beginning. And it's a tough feeling. Like in the summer, like we travel a lot for visiting family and stuff. And so I'm not in the studio, I'm not near my art nearly as much. And it's great because it does like cleanse, it helps me kind of create space and stuff. But there's also this like part of me in the back of my mind that's like itching to get back into that creative mode because I think it's
Yeah,
just such a part of who I am. So finding little ways to do it, like I go to the beach every summer with my family, and so like creating sand castles or sand sculptures or like collecting rocks, like I just have to find some way to make something. I just have
yeah.
this impetus to like create all the time.
Hmm.
It's a powerful thing, but sometimes it can get the best of me too.
It can, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, even things like cooking, that can still let your creativeness flow, and
Yeah.
making something new, or like you say, even music. I'm not very musically talented either, but I'll still try and sing when I'm on my own, and
Yeah.
listen to music and imitate what I'm hearing. And sometimes it's just nice to do just any creative outlet is just good at the time.
For sure.
If you can't get to your artwork.
Exactly, like the actual stuff you do, because like sometimes maybe that's even a limitation for us as artists, is like our attachment to like our creative output being so aligned with like a certain process,
Hmm.
whether it's painting or illustration, drawing, like, but the creative energy that's inside of us that we can't help but express can express itself, like you said, in cooking or, building a fire in the backyard or
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
like you can get into that state. So I think the older I get, the more I'm learning how to like engage that energy. Like you're saying, that kind of movement inside you where like, how to got to go create, like how to engage that in things other than just my own personal like explorations as an artist. And
yes.
that's been really cool to start to become more embracing of, is that like those creative energies can find expression in other ways too, that
Hmm.
don't have to be a part of your art
Yeah,
practice, so to speak. I
yeah,
think it's
I would
really
agree.
important.
I agree
Yeah.
with that for sure.
Yeah.
It, it,
I was
Go
gonna say
ahead.
one thing I noticed about your work that I find interesting is a lot of your designs come off of black as the background. Like
Yeah.
black is sort of like the void of space that all your energy in the work seems to like emanate from. And I have a really close friend of mine who's a tattoo artist, but also an incredible painter. KP Motheroo burner art account at Instagram. Check it out, y'all. He's amazing. Motheroo tattoo. But he always paints off black, like or at least for a long time, always paints off black. And he has this real sort of obsession with doing that. And the work has such a certain type of energy to it that's so powerful and interesting. Something I personally like never really do. So I was curious like why that is. I noticed that about your work and I found that interesting. And I was curious sort of about what's drawing you for the majority, not all of your work, but I would say the majority of your work is coming off of black.
Hmm.
Can you talk to us a little bit about like what's driving that?
Yeah, that is a good question, because I noticed that a few years ago with my artwork too. And I honestly, I think I just like it as a starting point with the negative space. And
Mhm.
I love reading about space and sci-fi stuff. Like I spend a lot of time reading vintage astronomy books, and
Cool.
I go on archive.org a lot, and I go through all the old files. They've scanned in all the books, and you can see all the original drawings. And I just love that kind of depth that it gives to the
Yeah.
images, and it really draws you into the focal point of the piece. Um, and over the years, I've tried to make it more colorful with instead of black, but I always just get drawn back to it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I
just
think it's beautiful. I think it's
I love
amazing.
it too. Yeah, I just like
Yeah.
I'll have these phases where I'll be like, okay, full color now, color everywhere, all over the page, and then
Yep.
I just think, oh, but if I just make it black again, I just like starting at that point. It's hard to describe it, but I think it's just that kind of big negative expanse just really
Yeah.
speaks to me in some way.
Yeah, I find it interesting because it does give it a more of a cosmic kind of feel when I
Hmm.
look at it, because the black of space is like this cosmic sort of feel, but it's also like the way the colors like pop off of the black
Hmm.
gives the colors like sort of a different otherworldly feeling, because we're so used to color, popping out from, except for obviously at night, but like the majority of the time when we're looking around during the day, like color kind of coming off of these lighter spaces in
Hmm.
some sense. So it does like give us a different experience of color in some ways. Black for me, like I definitely have used it in my paintings. I mostly use like really deep, dark blues or violets or
Yeah.
reds. Because black is, to me, has always been such an intimidating color because it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Like it's so powerful. Like, even just when you come to mixing paint, I put the tiniest bit of black, even a chromatic black, like in my paint mixture. It's like it's going to transform that color immediately so quickly.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
find there's such a power to it that I love, but I just appreciate that because I think it's hard to do. I think playing off black is actually very challenging to do well. And I think you do it really well.
Hmm.
And I just noticed that sort of theme in your work. So it's interesting.
Yeah. I have tried to figure out fully why I do it, but I think I just like starting at that point a lot of the time.
Yeah, starting with
You
the
know.
void, that kind of like empty,
Hmm.
there's a black void and a white void. I've definitely had some far out psychedelic experiences where I've been in the white void and in the black void.
Yeah.
They're both
Hmm.
there. But like, yeah, coming out of that black is it's just cool. It's really powerful and interesting to see. So I wanted to bring that up just before I let you go, because I was really interested in that resonance with coming off of black, and I think it's really nice. Do you ever play with like printing your work on like metals? Like, do you like dye sublimation prints, like printing your work
Never.
on?
No.
Yeah,
I would love to do stuff like that.
yeah, it'd
I
be
think it
really
would.
interesting.
I think it would with the metal printing. I think it would look really
Yeah,
cool.
I think it will look so cool, especially the way the blacks will look off that metal.
Hmm.
You should definitely look into that. I mean, you do sell your work for like licensing and stuff like
Yeah, I
that.
do that. I have a print store as well.
Yeah,
For some of the stuff that isn't licensed,
yeah,
like stuff that I won't put for licensing, so I can have it as print. So I'm more inclined to keeping as prints.
yeah.
And then I have a lot of drawings and stuff that I haven't. I'm in the process of sorting out that I want to put on available. Like those
Awesome.
drawings that I showed you, the bleeding.
Yeah.
I have loads of those. So
I
many
would
of
love to
those.
see more of those. I would love to see more of those because I think it's a cool balance to the digital work, but it's also
Hmm.
like bringing in a different sort of quality to like what you do in your creative output, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming up on an hour here. This has been such an awesome discussion. I think that we really talked a lot about that creative process, which is incredible. And I hope
Yeah.
people listening out there got a little inspiration for really embracing your creative process. But I really appreciate you and just all the images you're making and the work you're doing. I definitely want to see some of those drawings,
For
especially
sure.
that huge scroll of paper that you got from IKEA. Like, that
Yeah.
could be a
Yeah.
really epic piece. It'd be probably challenging to display it in a certain way because it's so huge.
Yeah. I'm
But
trying. I don't think there's any frame big enough to put it in, so it's gonna
yeah, you
have
just
to.
be cool to let it just scroll off the wall and roll onto the floor,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's gonna be the one.
But I really appreciate you, Liam, and I appreciate your time and your perspective. And I definitely really enjoyed speaking with you today. So y'all out there, definitely check Liam Warr on Instagram. I'll have all the links in the show notes to his amazing work. If you're looking to license artwork, images or anything, definitely check out Liam's website where he's doing that and just connect with him and all the amazing images that come out. Thank you so much again, Liam.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was really great chatting to you,
Awesome.
and I had a really fun time.
Yeah, always, man. Well, we'll talk soon. All right.
All right. You take care.
All right. You too. Thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of Concerning the Spiritual in Art. If you like what we're doing here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can stay in touch and in tune with all the amazing offerings that we're going to be bringing to this channel. Thanks again for all your support. Super grateful. And yeah, excited to bring more content your way. Peace, y'all.